Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I want to talk about Ukraine and the latest in the news. So I'm recording this on February 21st. Okay, so what has happened in the last 24 hours is this. There's been a request by the separatists for Putin to accept them as their own entity, okay? And Putin said a few hours ago that he'd be thinking about it, and then he signed a document that recognizes them as their own entity, okay? So it's what is called the Russian separatist region of Ukraine. That's what is represented here, okay? This is Ukraine, this is Russia, this is Crimea. And we know that during the Obama administration, Crimea was annexed by Russia. So they control this sea lane here. Okay, so also in the news, the president of Ukraine has been requested by Western nations, the United States and the Europeans, to relocate to another city of Ukraine and leave the capital. All right, now Putin has put positions all along this border here, but also in the northern side, which is Belarus, and you have positions here, okay? So it's not just the separatist area, it's also large swaths of Ukraine. Okay. With that said, Putin has accepted the separation of this region, or at least parts of it, as its own entity. Most likely what will happen is that troops will move in. These troops here will move in as support along this flank, okay? And you deal with any issues internally, strife internally, because we have to keep in mind that Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine, the separatist area, has been fighting each other for a while. So there's going to be internal strife in the separatist area. So they'll clean that out. It opens up for security reasons. Putin will use the excuse for security reasons to move the forces into here. He'll keep these forces on standby. And I personally think that he's positioning himself for carving out more of Ukraine, and not just now. There's a larger part of the separatist region. So I guess Ukraine, you can consider Ukraine being broken up into like states, provinces. Well, there seems to be two provinces that fall in line with the separate parts of that province as part of that separatist. It wouldn't be surprising to me that they try to take that whole province. Okay. But they're going to move their positions in. Now, Putin signed the recognition letter. There's been shelling that's been going on in this area a little bit more escalated than normal. The troops are positioned to move in. I don't know at this time of the recording if he's moved his tanks in yet to this region. Probably within the next 12 hours, that's going to happen. Now, but maybe he's going to wait a little bit. I don't know. On the diplomatic front, there was supposed to be the French prime minister brokering a deal between Putin and a talk with Biden. And Biden said that he would try to meet with Putin and try to de-escalate this, with the caveat that there would be no troop movement into the region. So I think that those discussions are going to be pretty much null and void because of what just transpired. By Putin recognizing the separatist region and stating that he's going to help the security of it, he has, quote, a reason for him to go in and push the line more towards the west. Okay. Now you have to remember, this is the way they spin it. These separatists were backed for years by the Russians. All right. Yes, it's true that there are a lot of Russian influence or culture relative to other parts of Ukraine. But I was listening to a kind of like a pseudo documentary from one of the Indian channels, and it's fascinating how this is all transpired. But Crimea, Khrushchev was part of obviously the Communist Party, right? When Stalin was in power. So Khrushchev was suggesting that they give Crimea back to Ukraine, give Crimea to Ukraine. Stalin didn't want to do that. It was only through Khrushchev where Crimea was actually given to Ukraine. And then fast forward to what happened in 2014 or whatever. And Russia re-annexed the Crimea. So the point that I'm making is that some of this cultural thing about this heavy duty cultural Russian influence within Eastern Ukraine and in Crimea was almost part of it is historical, part of it is manufactured by the Cold War. So, but I'm sure that people that know a little bit more about Ukraine will disagree with me. All right, but that's not the main point of this video. I'm going to give something very unique that I don't think you'll hear. And I think that it's very esoteric and it's very metaphysical. But my understanding is that supposedly this region may be going all the way to Crimea, but definitely this region here. And maybe Crimea, I'm not sure. Seems to have been in the cultural alignment to Russia going all the way back to the 1700s. Okay. I don't know if Crimea falls in that line or not. Maybe it does. It probably does. Okay. So there's always been this tension between like a Western Ukraine and an Eastern Ukraine and Russia. Okay. Now, there was the desire during the Cold War, during Stalin, uprisings in Ukraine. And that Crimea was given to Ukraine in contemporary time by Khrushchev. So let's keep that in mind. But I think what Putin is going to be doing is moving in his troops along that border within the province that are separating. And not all of that province is separatist. Some of it is Ukraine oriented and not Russian oriented. So there's going to be, I think Putin isn't just going right up to the edge where the separatists are. I think he's going to push through. And there would be no reason to be putting troops in northern Belarus unless he is thinking about carving out more of Ukraine. I think he's wanting to push something like this, do something like this. And so you're going to start hearing on the news evacuations on both sides, evacuations away from the border for the Ukrainians, and you're going to hear the separatists, some of their family members, you've been hearing that they're being given passports to Russia and all this, and there's this evacuation. Another reason for Putin to come in and try to stabilize the situation. So we may see, this could go two different ways. It can go, Putin could say, okay, I'm just going to go into the separatist region and stop. So he's going to take a little bit of land. Take, just a little bit, little piece. Okay. And then, or the other option is that he starts to move the border, move his defensive lines and carve out more of Ukraine, move forward. And move forward and take more peace, take more of Ukraine. All right, and it might be staged. He stops, waits a few months, and then moves forward. This may not be his full battle plan kind of thing. May take months. So the first stage and then the second stage. That's the way I'm seeing it. This may be 3 to 6 months, or this can accelerate really quick depending on what Ukraine does. Most likely, according to some of the generals that are being interviewed on Fox, one of the generals was saying Ukraine does have weapons, but the problem is that they're no match for the military of the Russians. It'll be a bloodbath. So that means that Russia can push this line if they want to very quickly. Now the question is, what does NATO do? When he's pushing all this, what will NATO do? Will NATO just sit back and just watch and just, position their forces along this border and and Ukraine is kind of like a buffer zone? Or will NATO get involved and get into Ukraine? That is going to start becoming a big question mark. Right now, they don't have any reason, they don't have any Article 5 kind of commitment to do it. But Ukraine, big chunks of Ukraine could be taken by Russia very quickly, is my point. Unless NATO comes in and helps. And it may actually make sense for NATO to come in and try to support Ukraine somehow, some way. But Putin definitely has a reason now to go into the separatist region and will reposition and be able to take the whole province. And then with the northern position, carve out more of the western area. If it, yeah, ideally, if he could get all of this coastline from the Sea of Azov, if he could get all this, ideally, then he has complete domination from a naval perspective of the sea. Now, okay, so that's a little bit of like, okay, that's where we're at and what might be happening with the front lines that are taking place. The separatist line and then the northern line, you know, when that is breached. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to talk about the esoteric aspect of what I think is happening. Now, it's going to be very unique and it's nothing that you've heard before. And you got to follow me because it's going to be a little bit esoteric here. Okay. Okay, there's something called the Sephiros, just like the tree of life. Okay. And there were three things, and you're going to say, what? You crazy, Paul? Follow me here. This makes complete sense if you listen to the whole story. Going back to Mount Sinai, and when Moses was given the oral law, the written law, and there were three things that he was given, and the people were given. That was the knowledge of Torah. Now, the knowledge of Torah is broken up into three parts, three pillars. All right. The first pillar is the written law. And then there's the oral law. All right, and then there is the Kabbalah. All right. Now, so written law, the Kabbalah, and the oral law. Okay. So what is the written law? What's the written law and what's the oral Kabbalah for the ones that don't know? All right. So the written law is the 5 books of Moses. That's the Old Testament. The oral law was passed down orally until the destruction of the temple, and then that's the Mishnah. And that ends up being codified for the writing of the Talmud and the interpretation of it. So it is eventually written down. And then the esoteric parts of prayer and mysticism, that is the Kabbalah. Okay, those three things came down from Mount Sinai with Moses. Okay. Now, parts of the Kabbalah were codified in writings in the Zohar. Okay. And some other writings, but in the Sefer Yetzirah and whatnot. But you know, but the esoteric part of it, and the temple and the sacrifices and prayers, why certain things were done, that was that the metaphysical aspect of it is through the Kabbalah. All right. But kind of like the history and the written law, what to do, is in the 5 books of Moses, and how to do it is in the oral law and the Talmud. That's what came down from Mount Sinai with Moses. Okay, now you're going to say, why are you telling me this? This is happening in Mount Sinai around the region of Israel, depending on where Mount Sinai is. You know, some people think it's in Saudi Arabia, and there's other people that think it's somewhere else, but in that Middle Eastern area. It's a lot farther from Ukraine. Well, during diaspora, there were many Jews that went into Europe, and they went 2 ways. They went up through the northern route, and then there was also going through an African route and Mediterranean route, and ending up in Spain. So the ones that were the Spanish Jews from diaspora, coming out of Israel and being in diaspora, those Spanish Jews were typically Sephardic. The Ashkenazic Jews were the ones that went from the northern area. Now, during the Spanish Inquisition, a lot of the Sephardic Jews ended up moving through Germany and into Hungary, Romania. This is what happened on my grandma, on one family line. My grandmother's family line starts in Spain, and through that ends up traveling to Romania. So she was Romanian when she moved to the United States. So she had a lot of Sephardic traditions that were held, but was Ashkenazic. Okay, so it's not so simple. If someone says, "Are they Ashkenazic or not?" It depends on if you stayed in Western diaspora or not. If you did stay in Western Europe diaspora, then you most likely held your Sephardic traditions and stayed Sephardic. But there are some Jews that were in the Eastern Europe that had a blend of Sephardic and Ashkenazic tradition. And then you had a lot in Eastern Europe that stayed just Ashkenazic. Okay. A lot of the Ashkenazic Jews were kind of like Talmudic related. They stayed more with the oral law. A lot of the Sephardic ones gravitated to the Ribbis that were more with the Kabbalah. Okay. Now, how does this relate to Ukraine? Well, there's a really famous person called the Baal Shem Tov. All right. And his real name is Israel. What's his real name? Rabbi Israel ben Eliezer. And he lived from 1698 to 1760. And he was, and where I'm going to be pointing to is maybe not terribly accurate in terms of geography here. Oblast. Kimlinsky Oblast, I guess is how it's pronounced. So he's living in a city and you have to remember these borders are changing. So, during these time periods. So what might be Poland one time period ends up being Ukraine in another time period, but this is Ukraine. This is the Ukraine, and I'll go a little bit deeper into that. I'm sorry, KHMEL TSKY OBLAST, something like Oblast. Okay. Kim, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Kimelsky Oblast, something like that. I'm not really sure where exactly it is. I think it's around here. Okay. I think it's around here. Okay. But the point, maybe it's a little bit higher. Okay. But the point here is that Baal Shem Tov was heavily involved in Ukraine. Now, Baal Shem Tov was kind of like the modern day reboot, contemporary day reboot, or the Enlightenment reboot of what happened at Mount Sinai with Moses. Now, remember what I said about fractals, okay? And fractals circle around and around and around. Well, if you take its center point and you go out a certain slice, right, a certain radius, there's going to be a repeat. And how much time it takes for that cycle to repeat increases. So this is, let's say, 1, and let's say this distance is 1.5. So it's takes a little bit longer to circle than the first circle. And the same thing is true with another circle and another circle. So there's these waves, but these waves are extending out. So it's similar to a wave, and then a longer wave, and then even a longer wave. So the wavelength is increasing. Okay, all right. But with the Baal Shem Tov, he's born in 1698 to 1760. This is during the time of the Renaissance. The point I'm making is that there are cycles within cycles, and they could be extended out and have a longer wavelength. Knowledge is imparted through Mount Sinai. And a big chunk of knowledge happens. Then a period of time takes place, and another big release of knowledge happens. All right. And this is where we're talking about the Renaissance, kind of situation here. So there's kind of like a rebirth. Okay. This is very close to when the United States ends up, 1776, ends up being born. Okay. There is a period of activity to lead to something new, to lead to something bigger. All right. Now, with Kabbalah, you have the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the tree of life. Right? And that is drawn like this. So there's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And they're connected. Okay, these things are connected. Okay, and this is like a crystal. And if you take, let's say, a structure, for example, salt, sodium chloride, you have a plus and a negative. But when they're together, it's stable. So the energy level, this is energy level, the energy level when it's connected has gone down. It wants to go down to be stable. When the energy levels are very high, it's unstable. They become unstable when you take this molecule and separate it. So it's stable when it's together, when it's close together, but when you separate them, they're unstable. And they want to get connected, they're charged. And when they're separated, the energy levels will go way up, waiting for it to drop back down to a more stable level. When you take the Sephiroth, which is a 5 by 5, and I don't know which way it divides out, but I have a feeling it's, I'm not sure how it divides out, but you take 5 points here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, this thing divides out. I'm not sure how it's dividing out, but let's say this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one is going this way. And this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one is going this way. The tree of life is charged and therefore has a very high energy level. The tree of life wants to stay together because there's not a high energy level and it's stable. But when you separate it, there's an energy field that takes place, and that you can get something, or something can come through. All right. The Baal Shem Tov is focused, like a lot of the Kabbalah and all this, a lot of it's focused in Ukraine, and they say the Ukraine, the breadbasket, right? It's the grain. I mean, it has a lot of ability for produce. The Ukraine. We don't say. It almost has its own kind of way of speaking about it. Russia, France. You don't say the France, right? You do say the United States, but you know, maybe there's a connection there. I don't know. You know, but you don't say the Brit, you don't say the Britain, right? You don't say the Germany, the Germany. You don't say the Saudi Arabia, the Israel. There's very few things that you would say the United States, the Ukraine. These are special places. And that connection between the birth of the United States and the importance of Ukraine being whole and staying at a low energy level. Okay. Now, what does that mean to what is happening in modern time? The separation of Ukraine is providing an energy field. And there's going to be a lot of disruption. But this is setting in motion a new amount of knowledge that's going to be coming into humanity. But there's going to be a lot of destruction and a lot of pain for that to happen. Okay, so this Ukraine is being torn apart. The Ukraine is being torn apart, just like the Sephiroth is being pulled apart. Now, there in Genesis it talks about what's his name? Abraham. Abraham goes through the parts. He's taking an animal, a series of animals, and cuts them in half, and he walks through the parts. And there's, there's like kind of like a fog that happens, and he's talking to God through the parts. And then he steps backward. He cuts the animals and walks through, and then he steps back. Okay. Well, what he was physically doing was making a charged Sephiroth by cutting the animals. The animals were cut in half, and each one of them allowed for the charging to take place, and it created a high energy field. And then you walk back out, and then you go back into a stabilized energy field. All right, same thing is happening here. Ukraine is a Sephiroth. I can't explain why, I don't know. But there's a reason why the Baal Shem Tov and a lot of this Kabbalah stuff's coming out of Ukraine. And this separation that's taking place is charging the world for a big event. Now, what that big event is, I'm not sure. But what I do know is that during these cycles, each one of these cycles is a big explosion of knowledge when it hits those intersection points. A big explosion of knowledge through Torah, a big explosion of knowledge during during the Greeks and the Romans, a big explosion of knowledge during the Renaissance. And there's going to be a big explosion in this new era that's going to happen out of this. Okay. And we're talking about, when we're looking at technology and our understanding of the world and space and time and advancements, they happen, they're not linear. What normally happens is that it's like it's moving up, and then there's a big jump, and it's moving up, and there's a big jump, and there's a moving up and a big jump. Each one of these big jumps is this intersection point. And this is the whole timeline of humanity. This is the human timeline. Okay? These jump diffusions, these big jumps, are the intersection of this large Fibonacci sequence. We're approaching, we're like right here. We're like right there. We're just about getting to the point where we're going to get this knowledge is imparted, and it takes a while to understand what that means. But the knowledge is there. Like, for example, we ended up reading the first draft of the human genome in 1999 or 2000, something like that, right? I think it was published in 1999. But that first draft of the human genome what that all meant took years to understand. So after that knowledge is imparted to us, then it'll take many years to fully understand what that means. And then as we start to, grow with our knowledge. The point I'm making here is that Ukraine is center to making this physical sephiros to bring the energy in of this understanding from this metaphysical plane. It's hard to explain what I'm saying, but I'm doing the best that I can. And then once this stabilizes, once the energy field goes down for Ukraine and it's whole again, then it will be, we will be at this point. Okay. This whole separation could be 70 years. Just like Moses and the Jews had to roam in the desert for 40 before they could see the promised land, right? Something similar. The destruction of and this flux that's going on in Ukraine could be many decades. But when it is reconstituted, then the energy level goes down, the Sephiroth closes, and then there's no more influx of knowledge. It's the use of that knowledge that happens. So while it's open, you're getting the knowledge. When it closes, you can only use and learn how to use that knowledge. But the big leap is when it is cut. And we are starting to see that as a molecule is starting to become pulled apart, it starts to have more and more tension. And all of a sudden, and they're charged, right? It takes a lot of energy to pull that molecule apart, and now they're charged, okay? Same thing here. We're seeing the carving out of Ukraine, and it's having that stress point, like a tension, a strain. It's a strain on a material, all right? And that strain is happening, and then all of a sudden breaks, right? This thing is straining, and as it's straining, it's going to get charged, and it'll go into a high energy field. And there's going to be something that's very similar to what happened during that Enlightenment period. 1740s, 1750s, 1760s, okay, 1770s. All right, it was really through the Enlightenment, right, and the Renaissance, right? The Renaissance is the 1400s. So you have like these big, you have these big epochs, right? You have like the Torah coming down, all right, and even knowledge before that. But let's just say the starting point is Torah coming down. The Torah coming down, and then you have the Greek and Roman epoch of knowledge. Then you have another cycle that is more like the Renaissance cycle, and then that's like the 1400s. And you have another cycle that is the Enlightenment, and that Enlightenment is what leads to the freedoms of the United States, the United States. Same thing here is happening, the Ukraine. There's going to be a tearing of Ukraine, and there's going to be knowledge imparted to mankind during this separation of the parts. And then there will be a closing of the parts. And mankind will benefit from the knowledge, but during the opening of the Sephiroth, there's pain because it's in a high energy state. That's why the Kabbalists say, you don't do this, because it's going to cause destruction. When you close it, that's when, you know, but there's going to be an amazing amount of knowledge that's imparted. So if you do this at the wrong time, then there's more and more destruction. So I think there's a metaphysical thing going on with the Ukraine. All right. Yes, we can dissect it on our plane as geopolitical, you know, Putin being the bad guy and, you know, failure of a president of the United States, having bad policy since, you know, the ending of the Cold War. You know, we can justify the reasons for things are happening here, but there's also a metaphysical plane that's happening too at the same time in parallel. And that what is going on in Ukraine is almost kind of like a centroid. There's probably a couple centroids, but it's a centroid of the Earth, all right? And geographically, all right? Metaphysically, there's these really important points, and when they're disrupted, changes happen very quickly. Important things happen. And I think this is what, in a different way, this is what John Hogue is saying. John Hogue is saying that it's astrology. Well, astrology is also Fibonacci sequence. But he was saying that when you take Pluto, you got the sun. Pluto is going around the sun, right? If you take the point in time when the birth of the nation, 1776, we've already gone through one cycle, one revolution of Pluto around the sun. So a lot has happened during that one revolution around the sun for the country to 2022. Okay. Well, we're going through kind of like a birthing pain again. This is why there is a connection between Pluto's circle, the United States, the USA, the Ukraine, and this Fibonacci that I'm saying about knowledge. They're connected. They're all connected. It's not a mistake that the Baal Shem Tov is coming from Ukraine. And that there's something big that's going to happen during this fracturing of the parts, the separation of the parts. You know, this may, you know, and I'm not a biblical scholar or anything, but this may be an interpretation of Mog and my Mog. Mog and my, yeah, Mog and my Mog, I think it is. You know, this kind of like Armageddon kind of thing that's happening, but it's really Kabbalistic, and it's a separation of crystal. It's a separation of a physical entity that's leading to knowledge to be imparted to humans. There's going to be an abundance of knowledge of the universe, of us, of how we use it. But pain has to happen during this high energy field. And that high energy field is going to affect our thinking, affect our emotions. It's going to affect nations and making decisions for war. You know, so that's my take on it. So Putin has to end. Putin has accepted the separatists for recognition. He's most likely going to be moving his tanks in as of this recording. I don't believe he has yet. And that he most likely is going to try to carve out more of the western or eastern side of Ukraine. The president of Ukraine has been asked to move out of the capital. So the United States is thinking that Ukraine is going to be, will be falling, not all of it, but Ukraine's a big country, but a big chunk of it is going to go to Russia. All right. And it sounds like the United States is not going to be putting our forces in Ukraine to stop it from happening. So we're going to see this as the beginnings of another Cold War. But then, Russia has problems with its population. I believe that this is going to lead to some sort of biological warfare that's going to be taking place. Even if the United States doesn't get involved, there may be some lacing of the area with biologics. So we got to keep that in mind. And there's this metaphysical thing that's happening, the separation of the parts, and this new knowledge that's going to be coming through. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be immediate. It may take a couple generations for that transmission to take place. But it's happening because these Fibonacci sequences are long. They're long. We're talking about durations around the sun at as far as Pluto. All right. So this period of time on getting it and closing this may be a 40-year trek. I don't know. It may be a little bit quicker, maybe a little bit longer, but it's not going to be immediate. But it's the beginnings of the separation. The separation probably happened a little bit already. It probably happened before 2014. So we're partially in this longer duration of the separation of parts. But as you're pulling the parts farther and farther out and they're eventually separated, then you get the full transmission. But there's something metaphysical happening in Ukraine. It's not by accident that Baal is from Ukraine. All right. So that's my take on it. Please subscribe to all my channels. Hopefully you learned something. I'm sure you haven't heard this from anybody, about this metaphysical aspect of it. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and purchase the products that I have to help support my work and to help support your health. I have nano silver products, liquids, gels, soaps, and lozenges. I have a multivitamin. I have lots of supplements from Boomer products that will help with anti-aging, reduce inflammation, help with sleep. I have a good night formula. I have a lot of good stuff that is for cardiovascular health, such as omega-3. So please purchase omega-3 if you want to, improve your cardiovascular health. I have deodorants that are all natural, made by Rainbow Herbals. They're very good, very high quality, and it doesn't have any of that toxic stuff that you would see in, let's say, Procter and Gamble type products. So, and I also carry C60, which is a very strong antioxidant, and it's great for anti-aging and reducing those things that cause disease because of an overabundance of reactive oxygen species. When you control that, you're reducing the chances of disease. When you control that, you're reducing problems with your mitochondria, and you're allowing your mitochondria to heal, multiply, and produce more ATP, and you'll have more energy. C60 is a great product. It's an excellent product. It's a very strong antioxidant, and you will see benefits in it, in your health and your well-being. So go to my store and purchase the products that I have. Please subscribe to all the channels I have. I have 3 channels on YouTube. I have Rumble, Brighteon, and Bitchute. Please subscribe to all of them and share the links from Rumble and Bitchute. People have problems sharing the links from Brighteon because of social media, but I'm also on GETTR. So follow me there. I'm on Twitter, follow me there. I'm on Facebook, follow me there. So go down the list. All the links are in the description. All right. But please help support my work because I'm not monetized. Please help support my work by going to the store and helping with your health. I've provided a lot of interesting information about the crisis that we call COVID-19, but also all of these other components to this crisis. The geopolitical component, the economic component, the biological component, the civil liberty component. So please help support my work and purchase the products that I offer at the-studio-regulate.com. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.